The first time I opened my grandmother's diary, I expected recipes, shopping lists, and musings about her garden. Instead, I found a confession that shattered everything I thought I knew about fairy tales. Scrawled in faded blue ink, her words bled with urgency. They told the story wrong. Cinderella was not who you think she was. I know because I was there. I slammed the book shut, my heart pounding. My grandmother, a retired seamstress who spent most of her life in a sleepy English village, had always been a quiet, gentle presence in my life. She died when I was 22, leaving me her modest home and, apparently, her secrets. The diary had been hidden beneath loose floorboards in her room. And with each page, it began to blur the line between myth and reality, pulling me into a story that felt too dangerous, too personal, to ignore. The main conflict. The diary began in 1952. My grandmother, Margaret, wrote about her apprenticeship under an elderly woman named Elara, who had once served in a noble household in France. Elara, she claimed, was no ordinary servant, she had been Cinderella's godmother. But Margaret's account did not speak of pumpkin carriages or glass slippers. She described Cinderella as a clever, ambitious young woman named Lucienne, who despised her stepfamily not because they were cruel, but because they stood in the way of her designs on the throne. Lucienne, according to the diary, used Elara's magic to manipulate perception, spells of glamour, illusions of beauty, whispers planted in the minds of courtiers. The glass slipper was no accident, but a trap, a charm that would only fit her foot, ensuring the prince had no choice but to choose her. And the prince? Margaret's diary revealed him as a pawn, enchanted into obsession. The happily ever after was a lie. Margaret wrote, Lucienne was no victim. She was the author of her own rise. And Elara, she regretted helping her until the day she died. Reading this, my stomach twisted. How could my grandmother, who had never once spoken of magic, claim to know all this? Was it allegory? A story to pass the time? Or was she confessing something real? I wanted to dismiss it. But I couldn't shake the feeling that my grandmother hadn't been writing fiction, she had been warning me. Emotional deepening. As I devoured the diary, I began to see pieces of my grandmother in a new light. She had always taught me that stories held power, that history belonged to the ones who told it loudest. I'd thought she meant politics, or literature. Now I wondered if she'd been hinting at something older, darker. And then I found a line that turned my blood cold. It is not over. The bloodline continues, and she watches from the shadows, keeping her throne. If you are reading this, beware the slipper. I stared at the words, my reflection trembling in the window beside me. Bloodline. I had grown up on the same fairy tales as everyone else, but what if Cinderella's story hadn't ended with a wedding? What if her power stretched across generations, hidden beneath the myths we tell children? That night, I dreamt of a woman in a pale blue gown, her face veiled, pressing a slipper into my hands. When I refused it, she whispered, "You have no choice. The story always repeats." I woke up gasping. Twists unfold. The more I read, the stranger things became. Margaret wrote about secret societies that guarded the truth of the fairy tales, groups that sought to suppress or reveal them. She hinted that many so-called fairy tales were coded histories, Snow White as a noble poisoned in a succession dispute, Sleeping Beauty as a princess placed under protective stasis, not slumber. But Cinderella, Lucienne, was different. She hadn't been a victim of history. She had rewritten it. Then I found the final, unfinished entry. It was dated just weeks before my grandmother's death. I hear her again. In the mirror. She says the time is near, that our family owes her a debt. I fear she will come for my granddaughter. My blood ran cold. Was my grandmother delusional in her final years? Or had she truly been hunted by the echo of a centuries-old queen who refused to let go of her power? I wanted to laugh it off, shove the diary back under the floorboards, and forget it. But then, odd things began happening. My bathroom mirror fogged with words that weren't mine, try it on. At work, a package arrived with no return address. Inside was a single high-heeled shoe. Glass. And when I held it, I swear I felt something pulse, like a heartbeat. The climax. I locked the slipper away, terrified. But that night, the dreams returned. This time, I wasn't just handed the slipper. I was wearing it. My reflection showed Lucienne's face instead of mine, her cold smile curving as she whispered, "It's your turn now." I jolted awake, my feet bare, but the slipper sat beside my bed, gleaming. I had a choice. Ignore it and risk whatever curse haunted my family, or put it on and face whatever truth lay beyond. Hands shaking, I slid my foot inside. The world tilted. My bedroom dissolved. I was standing in a grand ballroom, chandeliers glittering above me. Court musicians played, guests bowed, and on the throne sat Lucienne herself, unchanged by centuries. She was beautiful, yes, but in a way that unsettled the soul, her eyes sharp as razors. "You are her blood," she said, rising. "Margaret kept you from me, but stories always find their way back. It is time you took your place." My voice trembled. "What place?" At my side, she purred. "The world thinks stories are harmless. But we know better. Stories shape reality. You are heir not to a kingdom of stone, but to a kingdom of words. And with you, my reign will never end." I realized then what my grandmother had feared: Lucienne didn't just want me to wear the slipper. She wanted me to continue her legacy, to bend truth into myth, to use stories as chains. And the worst part? Some part of me wanted it. To be powerful, unforgettable. To rewrite my own painful, ordinary life. But then I remembered my grandmother's trembling handwriting, "Beware the slipper." Conclusion. I yanked the shoe off my foot. The ballroom shattered like glass, and I awoke on the floor of my bedroom, the slipper cracked in two beside me. The diary lay open on my desk, its final page rewritten in fresh ink that hadn't been there before. The story is never truly destroyed. Only delayed. Another ending waits to be written. I don't know if I defeated Lucienne or simply postponed her return. The slipper is gone, but sometimes when I pass mirrors, I see her face instead of mine, watching, waiting. And every time I pick up a pen, I wonder, am I writing my story, or hers?